Honourable Member for York West.
Hear, hear. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I am pleased to have an opportunity to speak to S4, and I'll be sharing my time with our fabulous member for Winnipeg North. So, Mr. Speaker, I think we're pleased that we're here to discuss this, but again, it's the same theory that, unfortunately, the Conservatives' divisive style of policy. You know, you're either with us or you're against us. I think all of us with S4 wanted to see some improvements on all sides, but unfortunately the bill came from the Senate, and any changes were going to disrupt the process of trying to get legislation through very quickly, which is typical, of course, of what the government's plan is. So I can only tell you that I was disappointed and have to stand and say that I have recommended to our party, the Liberal Party, to vote against Bill S4. It's legislation that could have given our digital privacy laws the shot in the arm that they so desperately need. And we would have welcomed that had we had the opportunity to make it better, which is what the intention was, certainly from the Liberal Party's perspective. As Canadians are increasingly turning to online commerce, education, banking, recreation, and communications platforms, our laws must keep pace in order to protect all of us. Sadly, this government has a willful ignorance and reckless disregard for reason on such matters, and S4 proves it again very, very clearly. Information oversight and management is not an area that this government has excelled in, so forgive me if my confidence is shaken a bit. I simply cannot accept their word without proof that they are actually protecting consumers' interests. But of course, the way this government looks at personal information protection and privacy has already been subject to a Supreme Court ruling, and the court gave the government another failing grade. But this should come as no surprise to anybody who's paying attention to politics in Canada right now. We all remember when the government lost a hard drive that held the social insurance numbers, medical records, birth dates, education levels, and occupations of 5,000 Canadians. Or remember when the Interim Privacy Commission revealed that telecommunication companies received an average of 1.2 million requests from federal enforcement bodies for private customer information every year, approximately 3,300 every single day. Requests for our personal information, for Canadians' personal information. But perhaps I should also mention the headline that appeared in the Hill Times this week. It warned that Canada's access to information regime is slipping into, guess what, irrelevance.
1,800.
The article went on to reveal that the Centre for Law and Democracy ranks our ATI regime 56 out of 89 countries. 56 out of 89 countries. Wow, we're really way up there, aren't we? It also said that in September 2014, Canadian Journalists for Free Expression noted that our ATIP request is severely failing to meet its minimum requirements, let alone adequately serve the population's needs. So while I understand that access to information laws are different than digital privacy laws, these examples all point to a government that doesn't understand information management, yet refuses to seriously consult or listen to the experts on the matter that came before committee. The government's stubborn refusal to listen to experts like Professor Michael Geist, many others that came, lawyers, professors, that said, yes, it's a good piece of legislation, but it could be better. And our intent, certainly on the Liberal side, was to try to make it better. But as everyone here knows, Bill S4 was referred to the committee after first reading, as my colleague had mentioned. This is typically done for procedural reasons, and because it more readily allows for substantive amendments, the referral traditionally indicates the government's willingness to compromise, which was really very unusual that they did this, but it was very welcome. We thought that maybe the government had really seen the light and thought that maybe together we could really improve something as important as this piece of legislation. And so we gladly supported it after first reading, and we're preparing to move whatever amendments were that we could work together with the government and really make it a good, strong bill. And it was on this implied promise that the Liberal caucus was prepared to support Bill S4. So committee members heard from several experts, including the Privacy Commissioner, IBC, the Canadian Bar Association, Professor Michael Geist, and so many, many more, and we took their counsel to heart in those 4 meetings. I think it was 4, was the total meetings that we had. Then after the hearings concluded, over 42 substantive amendments were presented in good faith, most taken directly from expert testimony. Those 42 amendments came from the 3 opposition parties here in the House. So let me give you an example. I introduced an amendment that was specifically proposed by several witnesses and contributors to the committee study, including the Insurance Bureau of Canada. The amendment dealt with a reporting threshold for privacy breaches. My amendment would have required the reporting of any unlawful breach of personal information security so long as the said breach presents a significant threat of harm to an individual. That same amendment also clarified what a company needed to do to remedy the breach, including a requirement to warn the victim that their information was lost. Sounds pretty basic. If my credit card was compromised or my personal information was lost, I would want to know that. But the government was unmoved. In just one short meeting, government members defeated every single amendment introduced without any explanation or defense. Every single one of those amendments, and I said there were over 42, some were out of date by the time other ones had passed or had been defeated already. But again, there was no explanation, no big defense. It was simply the silent majority on the other side of the House that voted them all down, just like they do all the time at all committees anyway. You heard me right. Despite warnings of overly broad, cumbersome and nebulous provisions within S4, the Conservatives took less than 3 minutes each to consider, discount and defeat everything that the expert had warned us about. As a result, Bill S4 remains flawed. It has never been fully considered and should not be accepted or passed without a true and unbiased evaluation. But allow me to be clear, there are positive elements to Bill S4. For example, the legislation grants the Privacy Commissioner the ability to enter into enforceable compliance agreements with companies that have likely breached the Act. This provides a regulatory remedy for certain actions and is a positive development. Public Safety Canada said the bill would help to protect the security and privacy of Canadians by limiting the number of police and security officials who can request subscriber data and applying new requirements for recording, reporting, and auditing those requests. Now, these may be good things, but several independent and credible sources outside of government expressed their concern with S4. For example, many warn that metadata could be used to track specific individuals on the Internet, and when in the wrong hands, that tracking could represent a serious threat to personal privacy. Bill S4 utilizes a similar approach, and this is an issue of tremendous concern for those of us on this side of the House. But of course, I want to ensure that law enforcement officials have the information they need to keep us all safe, but a blank check approach is inappropriate and promises limited success. We could do better if the government would just listen to the experts and have worked with the opposition. But in broad strokes, Bill S4 represents a shift in the way we deal with digital privacy. Privacy laws have traditionally outlined the rules and procedures needed to protect information and personal data. But in this case, the legislation sets up circumstances under which that material can be released. In a world where crimes involving personal data theft, identity fraud, and online stalking are on the rise, protecting data is crucial. And data is not just information, it's a commodity, it's power, and it's a backdoor into our private lives. Liberals are deeply concerned that the government's commitment to safeguarding the personal information and privacy of Canadians is less than absolute with this S4. Whether driven by conservative ignorance or intent, Canada is clearly on the cusp of a paradigm shift with respect to privacy laws. and Liberals are worried about the consequences of Conservative insolence. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on S4.
Questions and comments?